Okay, so one of the things we mentioned last week was the word Vayomer El Amo, and he said to his people, Hine Am Bnei Israel, behold the nation of the children of Israel. That was on chapter 1, verse 9 of Exodus. So in the art scroll, it's page 292. Maybe I can share it. Right, so verse 9, he said to his people, meaning Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, says to his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more numerous and stronger than are we. Get ready, let us deal shrewdly with them. Okay, but in any case, verse 9 is he says to his people, behold, here they translate the people of the children of Israel. But the reality is that the word Am is also a nation. And we pointed out that the first person to call the Jewish people a nation is Pharaoh, and in a negative context, of course, because till then they were children of Israel. And after that, for most of the Torah, they're considered Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. They don't say Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael as a sort of a later phrase. Children of Israel highlights the fact that we're family. And we mentioned that the first person to call them an Am is Pharaoh, and in a negative way to sort of to highlight that they have their own loyalties and they're not loyal to Egypt, and that's the reason for the persecution. And that was last week. So Mark mentioned that we should look at the other places where the first place that the Torah refers to the Jewish people as nation. And I said, I'm going to have to look for it. And I didn't realize how soon it is, but I did Google it. I did check it up. And it appears very early.
Abraham?
No, Abraham, not Am. Abraham, children. Abraham is children. Zaracha. Go ahead.
But did he allude when he said Israel?
Yeah.
Great nation.
Yeah, he says Ishmael will be a great nation. Also earlier in the Torah, he said also earlier to Jacob, he says, you're going to have a nation and community of Goy Ukal Goyim. A Goy is also a nation. You'll have nations from your descendants. Also, when Rivka was pregnant, and so he says, Shnei Goyim v'bitnech, 2 nations are in your womb. It doesn't say the word Am, but it does say the word Goy, which is actually a more elevated term. Goy is considered more respectful than Am. Am is sort of more of like the common denominator between people. Goy is more prominent, but that's the saying. You're going to have a Goy. You're going to have a nation. But where are they referred to? It's the first time that they are referred to as a nation. That's the future tense. It's going to be a nation. Where do they turn from a nation, from a family to a nation? So Pharaoh says it in verse 9 of the Torah, of the book of Exodus. The question is where Hashem says it. So didn't know this till this morning, but I did see the verse. Let me just find it. Okay, so it's also chapter 3 of the book of Exodus. So it's also in Egypt. And if you turn to the art scroll, it's going to be on page 303. And on the screen here, we'll put it to 303, and it's going to be verse number 7. So this is at the burning bush, where Moshe sees the burning bush, and he comes close, and Hashem says, take off your shoes. It's a holy space. And then if you look at verse 6 and 7, okay, so verse 6, he said, meaning Hashem said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look toward God. Okay, that's 6. 7. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. Whoops. Okay, so we're looking at chapter 3, verse 7. And he said, so the Lord said, so this is at the scene of the burning bush. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their slave drivers, for I know their pains. I have descended to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good land and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And then he says, and now behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression that the Egyptians are oppressing them. And he says, so now come and I will send you to Pharaoh. So this is the first time where Hashem sends Moshe, or tells Moshe, sends Moshe to Pharaoh at the burning bush. So this is the conversation. And in verse 7, he does say, indeed, Ami. I've seen the affliction of my people, but Ami is my nation. So here is the first time where Hashem, or anybody, refers to the Jewish people as an Am, as a nation, other than Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh referred to them a few decades earlier, at least 8 decades, maybe even more. But yeah, probably 8, 9 decades earlier, so almost 100 years earlier. But here is the first time that Hashem is referring to them as a nation. So the question is, what do we make of all of this? So with Pharaoh, we talked about this last week, that Hashem, we talked about this last week, that Hashem, that he's using it to say that they're a nation in the sense that they have a different loyalty. So he's using it in the negative. But what does it mean that Hashem refers to the Jewish people in Egypt for the first time as an Am? So there probably are multiple perspectives, and anybody wants to share, I'm always open and happy to hear. Just one angle, perhaps, is there's an angle that a few commentaries point out. The Rebbe spoke about it, Rabbi Shamshon Hirsch spoke about it, probably others, that the way that people become a nation, the way the Jewish people become a nation is very different than most nations. Most nations, when you become a nation, you become a nation on a certain piece of land, right? There are certain people living together in a certain piece of land, and that forms a nation. And the laws that they have is really a response to the country they live in. If they live on the sea, if they live in dry land, if whatever the occupations are. So in other words, the nation is a result of the land. And that's why even in the way people speak, you have the motherland, right? Because the nation, the land is seen the place that gives birth to the nation. The Jewish people is the only people that they don't become a nation in Israel. They don't become a nation in the homeland. They become a nation either at Sinai, but really even before, which is in Egypt. And in Egypt, they don't have their own nation. And yet Hashem himself refers to them as a nation, right? So this is an interesting phenomenon. So you could talk about the nation as, you could talk about this from different angles. Usually, you could talk about it from different angles. In other words, we are a people because Hashem chooses us, because Hashem makes us his people. The land is the result of the peoplehood. Because Hashem chooses us for his people, therefore, he gives us the land he promised our ancestors. But it's not that what makes us a people is the land. And that's also why we're able to survive 2,000 years without a land, which is unprecedented. There's no such thing as a nation that was 2,000 years without a land, then comes back to the land. It's impossible, because what makes you a nation is a land. So if you're taken away from your land, then you're not a nation. You'll fall apart. You'll disintegrate. But we are a nation before we got the land. So the land doesn't define us. The land is a result of our peoplehood. The land is not the cause. Is not the cause of our peoplehood. And if you think about it in a way, so that's in general. It's the most times we say we become a nation at Sinai, certainly not in Israel. But the birth of the nation is in Egypt, right? There's a chapter in Ezekiel where he describes the Exodus is like the birth, because we were taken from a nation from within a nation. The Torah says this in Deuteronomy, this week's parsha. God takes a nation from within a nation. So Egypt is like the mother in a way, and we're born within the womb of Egypt in a way. So it's a very strange thing that we don't become our nation in Israel or even in the desert, but we start to become a nation in Egypt, which is a very unlikely place to become a nation. Not only in the desert is neutral ground, right? But within another country that's unheard of, unprecedented. So one way to think about it is put this in line with other things that the Torah does to indicate to you that the Jewish people, the birth of the Jewish people and the essence of the Jewish people is not like other nations, and we're not subject to the natural laws, because naturally that's not the way you become a people. And if you look at the Torah, the book of Genesis, you'll see that almost all the patriarchs do not give birth, or matriarchs do not give birth naturally. It's always a struggle. It's always a difficulty. Sarah gives birth at 90, and Rebecca gives birth after 20 years of being barren. In other words, you need supernatural intervention to create the Jewish people. And in a way, what it's telling you is that the Jewish people are not subject to the laws of nature, because by laws of nature, we would not exist. We would not be born. So the patriarchs would not be born by the laws of nature, but also the people of the Jewish people are not born in the manner that most nations are born. Like I said, most nations are born, they're living on a land. So they bound together. Look at the United States. We're at 13 colonies. We're living together on this land. We have certain common interests. So we form to create a nation, to protect ourselves, to tax ourselves, whatever it is, to avoid oppression, etc. But it's a result of living in a certain geography. And the Jewish people know the Jewish people's becoming a nation was not as a result of being in the land. To the contrary, they first of all, they in the desert they had no land where they formally became a nation, but their birth as a nation was within a foreign land. And like I said, that doesn't happen. So again, that's coming to tell you that don't view the Jewish people the way you view other nations, and therefore the predictions about the Jewish people's demise throughout history the Jewish people always defy the predictions and what the experts say about experts on what's the natural order of things. The Jewish people are going to defy that because their very being in essence is not subject to nature, as evident in the way the patriarchs and matriarchs were born, and also we would become a people in an unlikely space, and it's not as a result of the natural way of the way people are born. So that's just a little bit about on the filling in for what we started last week. Okay, now we got to figure out what we want to start this week.
You think that Sarah making that statement was making a distinction in that we are the other?
Yes. I think from his perspective, we're the other. So label them as an other and then say that they're a threat, which is exactly what he does. So you can always write it off and say Pharaoh's an anti-Semite. He calls us a nation before we were a nation. But then Mark tells me later, he says, let's look where Hashem called them a nation for the first time. Or my nation. And that's also in Egypt. Not when they're at the moment of Exodus, which you say, oh, now they're leaving, now they become a nation. Hashem himself tells you they become a nation in Egypt. What is the meaning of that? What does it mean that we become a nation in Egypt? It's a very strange place to be born as a nation. So one way to think about it is, it's exactly the point, that we do not become a nation the way other nations become nations. And therefore, we're not subject to the laws of nations. And that's why there's unprecedented. It's impossible for a nation to be outside its land for 2,000 years and survive. It's even 100 years, even 200 years. These things don't exist, because what makes you a nation is your connection to the land. Once you're away from the land for a few generations, you're no longer a nation. What binds you with other people? And the Jewish people prove that they're different, because they become a nation. They're not dependent on the land because it's not a result of the land, because they didn't become a nation in a land. They became a nation before there was a land, and they became a nation within another nation. So it's sort of, it breaks all the rules of how nations are formed. And the point here is that we have our own, we're not subject to the laws of nature. And that's why historically we have not been subject to the laws of nature, and historically we've survived. And if you want to connect it to the season, we're in the season of Ninth of Av, all the oppression and all the exile, and there's no logical path how the Jewish people would be able to survive all the calamities that befell them. And if we're still here today, in the middle of the summer, in August, no less, people, when it's nice weather, it's not even raining, and everyone's sitting here studying Torah, that means that we're not subject to the laws of nature. Go ahead, Vicky, please.
Thank you, Rabbi. I have to apologize. I probably missed the conversation last week. But don't we think that the first time that we are mentioned as a nation is in Egypt sets us apart from other nations, that we need to kind of resist the values that other nations pursue, will be like, kind of sets us apart, because we are officially becoming a nation after giving of the Torah, but it was before giving of the Torah, right? So yeah, even before giving of the Torah, what do you think the meaning of this first mention is?
I think that, I think you're going in a good direction. I would think that we are a nation that, if you think about it, for the most of our history, we were not living on our own land, right? For the most of our history, we were in foreign lands, and we're able to survive as a nation within a nation because we understand that what defines us is our connection to Hashem and connection to our history and our past and our fellow Jew, and so it's therefore no surprise that we were born within another nation because historically that has been our experience, right? But I think that experience is that we have to maintain our own identity within a broader identity, and not lose our identity. If we had, we wouldn't be sitting here today, right? So if we're sitting here today, it's because many people in our past, were able to preserve while being in other countries and under influences, were able to preserve their own story. And that's critical to the Jewish people. But I think that the more fundamental point is the fact that we are indeed different. You're pointing out one of the ways that we are different. But why are we different? Why is this? There's no other phenomenon. There's no other phenomenon of a nation born without a land, and then they go find a land. You don't do that. Maybe you don't really go find that. A tribe would do that, but not a nation, right? So I think at the core is we are different. And one of the expressions of the fact that we are different is that we are able to maintain our identity even within a broader identity, because what defines us is not a land.
And the history proves it, because we're surrounded by other nations anyway, and we still need to maintain our loyalty to monotheism and to Jewish values, despite of everything else that's going on around us.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's
the point.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting angle. Okay, now we could go back a little bit. I don't know if go back or go forward. There's different. I don't know if you want to go big picture stuff, small picture stuff. Let's look at a few details, and then we'll get to the big picture. Right? There's always a balance. How detailed do you want to go, and how much of a big picture? So we'll start with the details. We discussed. We already read last week, verse number 8, chapter 1. So let's see if I can share it. Page 293. Excuse me. So we read verse number 8. Verse number 8 said, "A new king arose over Egypt who did not know about Joseph." And he's the one he's the one who begins to plot against the Jewish people, eventually enslave the Jewish people. So, and he said to his people, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel." Okay, a new king arose over Egypt. Vayakam melech chadash, a new king stood up, who did not know Joseph. Now the question is, why didn't he know Joseph? Could you really not know Joseph? Is it possible that a king would not know Joseph? So Rashi, I'll open the Rashi. Rashi says, well, it cannot mean he doesn't know Joseph. It could mean that he doesn't. It could mean that he made believe. Rashi quotes it from the Talmud. Means that he acted as if he did not know about him, right? Who did not know. Means that he acted as if he did not know about him. It's impossible for someone not to know Joseph, not to know about Joseph at that point in history, so recently after he passes. And there's also a controversy about new king, Rav and Shmuel. We're not going to get into that. I think I mentioned it last week briefly. But I saw an interesting interpretation that says as follows. Nowhere in the Torah does it say, Vayakam melech chadash, a new king arose. It's a very unusual expression. Usually what it says is one died, the other one ruled, Vayimloch, Vayamot. This one ruled, this one died. The other one ruled, his Vayimloch. He would say, Vayimloch melech chadash, a new king ruled over Egypt. What's Vayakam? Arose, or standing up. So one theory is that the reason why the Torah uses this very unusual word is because we're talking about almost like a revolution. In other words, within Egypt, a new king arose, a new king that wasn't supposed to be the king, or wasn't in the line of kings, and a new king sort of takes over the power, creates a coup and takes over the power. And that's why it says Vayakam. Now, I don't know if this is true, because it's only one interpretation. You don't have to accept this interpretation, and I don't know what the history of Egypt suggests. So I'm not that knowledgeable, so I can't say. But I'm just putting out a theory here, and the theory is that Vayakam, and he rose up. Rose means he rose up. Rose up means creating a revolution, and in that case, what usually happens is the new emperor, the new king wants to sort of erase the history that preceded them, or at least paint it in a bad way to justify the fact that they are creating this new revolution. And that's why he puts aside Joseph. And that's why he says whatever Joseph did was wrong and harmful for Egypt. And therefore we have to retaliate against Joseph's family, which was a threat. So if this is true or not, I don't know, but it's an interesting observation. Yet the observation is still true that Vayakam, and he rose, a new king arose is an unusual expression. One possible interpretation could be this one. Okay. What happens later is interesting. And the question is how you descend to get an entire people to engage in genocide. And you have it, like everywhere else in history, these things happen gradually. Okay, so if you look at what does he say to the beginning? At the beginning, he says, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more numerous and stronger than we." Okay, get ready, let us deal shrewdly with them. Okay, so what should we do? So they appointed over them tax collectors to afflict them with their burdens, and they built store cities for Pharaoh, namely Pithom and Ramses. Okay, so they tax this population. And the tax in this sense is not paying a tax, but the tax is the obligation to work for Egypt. Okay, so they build storehouses for Pharaoh, Pithom, and Ramses. That is not so. That's not so difficult to get people to get the nation to engage in this sort of oppression. Okay. Problem is, then the Jewish, as much as they afflicted them, so did they multiply, and so did they gain strength, and they were disgusted because of the children of Israel. We'll talk about that in a minute. So they continue the oppression, the enslavement, and now, once the enslavement is not enough, verse 13 and 14, they embittered their lives with hard labor, with clay and with brick, and with all kinds of labor in the fields, all that work that they worked with them with back-breaking labor. Okay, fine. You could still get people to enslave people. It's still not so unusual. I mean, it's not so unusual, at least in the ancient world. The next step is interesting. Next step he tries to do is try to threaten the survival of the Jewish people by having the children killed. So the first step, he can't tell the Egyptians, go kill all the Jewish children. It's a very difficult thing to do. Not necessarily will people listen right away. So the first thing he does, he tries to do so shrewd in secret. Now the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one who was named Shifra and the second who was named Puah. I just want to say that there's different interpretations. The Rashi's interpretation is, this is the way they translated here in 15. In the English on the screen, my guess is that's the way ArtScroll translates it too. Hebrew midwives. Hebrew midwives means the midwives were Hebrews, right? Hebrew midwives, mi'adot ha'ivriot, Hebrew midwives. One was named Shifra and the second named Puah. Rashi says, the Medrash says, that we're talking about Hebrew midwives. Shifra and Puah are just names of sort of the occupation. It's really Moshe's mother and sister. That's what Rashi says. Shifra comes from the word beautiful. Puah means from the word speaking. They would beautify the child. They would speak to the child to calm the child down. And that's why they have these names. That's what the Chazal, that's what the sages say. An alternative interpretation is not the Hebrew midwives, but the midwives of the Hebrews, right? The midwives of the Hebrews means they're not Jewish. And he turns to those midwives who are not Jewish, and he says what he's about to say, which is kill the Jewish children, the Jewish males. And he said, the newborn males. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew woman and you see on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall put him to death. But if it is a daughter, she may live. Now, that's what you do. If you want to create genocide, it's very hard to get everybody to start killing babies, right? That's an unusual thing. But you get a select group of people to do so. Oh, that's a little bit easier. So he tries to go and get the Hebrew midwives. So it's either the Jewish midwives or the midwives of the Jews, one or the other. In any case, this plan doesn't work. Verse 17, the midwives, however, feared God, so they did not do as the king of Egypt had spoken to them, but they enabled the boys to live. Pharaoh is very upset. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing? That you have enabled the boys to live? And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are skilled as midwives. When the midwife has not yet come to them, they have already given birth. So, and it says that God, so basically it said it was too late. The Hebrews don't know what they're doing. They could give birth even without the midwives. So the verse continues, that God benefited the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And now it took place when the midwives feared God that he made houses for them. In other words, made them great. Rashi is going to say, in line with the sages, that it's Moshe's mother, Moshe's sister. So they're getting houses, and the Jewish people means the houses of priesthood and houses of kingship. But that doesn't work because they're not cooperating. So now Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born, you shall cast him into the Nile, and every daughter you shall allow to live. And that's the end of chapter 1. So chapter 1 ends with a very difficult decree, and the result of that decree is what's going to play out what's going to play out in chapter number 2, which is the birth of Moses. But the point here is that here too, he starts by trying to get a small group of people to kill the Jewish children. He's not able. Eventually he speaks to everybody, l'chol amo, his entire people. There is a theory. I don't know how important it is to say this theory, but there is a theory that amo doesn't mean the entire people. If you go back to this theory that vayaka means is a revolution, and Pharaoh creates a coup. This new Pharaoh creates a coup. So he has his family or his tribe, and they take over Egypt. With his people is his tribe. And therefore, when you go back to verse 8, and when it says, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and he said to his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more numerous and stronger than we are. That's very strange. Did they really think that the Jewish people are more numerous than the entire population of Egypt? That's very unusual. So you could be exaggerating, and that's what people do. That's what haters do. But one theory would be that they are more numerous than Pharaoh's people, because Pharaoh's people is not all of Egypt. Pharaoh's people is specifically his tribe. In other words, the tribe of the family of this group that seizes power. And now he says the Jewish people are a threat because the Jewish people, they're descendants of Joseph. They know how to run an economy. They could fight back. So he's speaking to his people. He's speaking to his clan. And he tells his clan, we got to worry about the other clan. So we have to enslave them. And then at the end, also, not all of the Egyptians are killing babies, but his people are. So you can read it any way you want. I'm just putting it out here. Why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story because seemingly this whole story of the verses is a lot here. Verse 15 to verse 20, 6 verses, seemingly is not really relevant to the story. If you think about it, and especially the way the thing breaks down, chapter 1 talks about generally. There's almost no names in chapter 1 after the beginning, but we mention the names of the people who came to Egypt. We're talking about the Jewish people as a whole, how the Jewish people are enslaved, how the Jewish people multiply, how the Egyptians bitter their lives. We're not really talking about stories of individuals. The individual stories begin in chapter 2, when a man from the house of Levi marries a daughter of Levi, and the birth of Moses. That's where you have individual. So the lens turns to the individual, chapter 2. Chapter 1 is still very general. Now, what would be the purpose of talking about this conversation of Pharaoh with the midwives if this plan is actually an utter failure? Doesn't work, right? Verse 15, Pharaoh has a plan. He wants to get the midwives to kill the Jewish males. So we read about the plot. The plot is he calls the midwives and he tells them what to do. They defy him. They don't do it. He calls them back and he says, why don't you do it? Why didn't you listen to me? Why didn't you kill the kids? They come up with a story. They make up a story. They say the Jewish midwives, Jewish women are like, they say because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are skilled as midwives. Chayot. Chayot means they're skilled. Chay, they give birth. Some people say they're like animals. Like animals, they don't need midwives. That's what Rashi says. Chayot is like a chaya, a wild beast, a wild animal. In any case, this doesn't work. So they come up with their excuse. And then he says, God did good for them. And God made them homes. Very nice story, 6 verses, but it really doesn't advance the plot. Because in chapter 1, we're talking about the big picture. The big picture is Jewish people are enslaved. The Jewish people, the Pharaoh gives a decree to kill all the firstborns. And that's how Moshe is born. Then we get to chapter 2, where we fine-tune the lens specifically on the family of Moshe. But what's the point of giving 6 verses about a plot that fails? That's the question. It's not a very big question, but it's still a question. You always need a question, right? Otherwise. So one theory is like this. One theory is that the purpose of this story is not to tell you how Pharaoh tried to enslave and kill the Jews. In that sense, this was a failed attempt, and it's not relevant because ultimately, what Pharaoh does is the end of verse one. The end of verse 1, when Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, "Every son who was born, you shall cast him into the Nile." That's the decree that was consequential, and that was the decree that is important also because it killed many Jewish children, but also because Moshe. That's how we understand how Moshe was born, and the episodes surrounding Moshe's life. But the stories of the Pharaoh calling the midwives indeed do not advance the plot. If you think the plot is how Pharaoh tried to get the Jewish males killed. But maybe there's a much deeper point here. Maybe the point is that the redemption cannot come until the people, either Egyptians or Jew, depending on the two opinions, until people defy the Pharaoh. And this is a story not about the failure of Pharaoh to get the Jews killed, which is, if that's the story, it's irrelevant because he makes another decree, and that second decree is effective. But really, it's a story about defiance. How midwives, either Egyptian or Jew, defy Pharaoh, and that's the seed of redemption, and that's how Moshe could be born. And if you think about it next week, it's also, you're going to see some of the people who defy Pharaoh. Probably the most important person who defies Pharaoh in not next week, in chapter 2, is Pharaoh's own daughter, right? Pharaoh's own daughter, saving Moshe, defies the Pharaoh. So we're not saying you have to necessarily be a Jew. It could be both. The Jews defy, in some sense, Moshe, but Jews, Egyptians, doesn't matter who. But redemption can only come. The redemption can only come when, in this terrible situation of oppression and of murder, that there are people who are willing to defy the Pharaoh, and that's the seeds of redemption. And that's why the stories of these midwives is critical, because that spirit is what allows for the redemption to follow. And that may very well be why the sages want to believe that this is Moshe's mother, because the question is, where does Moshe get this? Moshe also, in some ways, goes to defy the Pharaoh when he kills the Egyptian, as we'll read those stories. So Moshe also has to get this from somewhere. Where is this in his DNA? If you say he got it from his mother, okay, now we understand. His mother also did it before him. Where did his mother get it? We talked about this in the past, that the sages say that his mother was the 70th soul born specifically at the entrance to Egypt. So his mother, in one sense, experienced the pain of exile because she was born in Egypt. In the other sense, she's also connected to the land of Israel because she was born on the way in. So if you're 1 foot in the exile, 1 foot out of the exile, your whole psyche is not completely overtaken by the slavery. So that would sort of give you the perspective to be able to define. But in any case, it's interesting to see this chapter 1, or the end of chapter 1, in this light, that we're not here to tell you how Pharaoh tried to kill the Jews, because if so, those 6 verses, verse 15 to verse 20, is not important. It's a plot that it failed. So what's the point? What's the point of reckoning it? Do you want to say every plan that Pharaoh tried to do and failed? Why is that important? But if it's to say that we need defiance to be able to survive the Egypt, now it's critical. And now that's going to be the lead up to what's going to happen in the next portion, where other people defy the Pharaoh's own family, and then Moshe, etc. Go ahead, Dr. John, please.
Rabbi, what you just said is very profound, and I want to take it a little bit further. Since we don't read Torah as a history book, but as a book related to principles, how much does this concept of defiance as a prelude to redemption show up in the Rebbe's teachings throughout just history, and within presumably the life of an individual? Must we as individuals exhibit defiance before we can be redeemed?
I think the answer is yes, and I think it's not just the Rebbe's perspective. I think it's a very Jewish trait. You talked about this, mentioned this last week. Jews are for the most part involved in revolutions and involved in new philosophies, because the Jews feel innately that we don't just necessarily wait around for redemption, but it's our responsibility to do something to move the world to a state of redemption. Now, sometimes we come up with good ideas, sometimes we come up with bad ideas, but that's already a separate discussion. But the idea that we're not going to just sit and wait passively, but it's our responsibility to correct the world That is something that is embedded within Judaism, I think. And if you want to talk about the Rebbe, so the idea of Mashiach, the idea of the Messianic era, of course, was always a central part of Judaism. Look at Maimonides; he says it's the one of the 13 principles of the Jewish faith. But the Rebbe felt that the way you look at redemption, you don't look at it as something in the distant future that one day will happen in many generations, but it's something that everybody is supposed to try to work to bring closer through doing good deeds, through healing the world. But he made this idea, this not just belief in the distant concept of Mashiach, but thinking about it and trying to create a world today through our own actions, to create a world that's more consistent with the way the world would be in the Messianic era, which means a world full of goodness and kindness. He felt that this was very important to the way we should live our lives. So in other words, you're doing it, you're not waiting for God to bring the redemption, but you're doing what you can to create healing and to create peace and create kindness in your environment. So you're creating a world that will mirror the world of the redemption. And for the Rebbe, that was very important, certainly in all his 40 years of his leadership, but also especially at the end of his leadership. He would talk about this all the time. And that's the idea that you have to do. That's defiance. Defiance means you're not waiting for the stars to align and redemption to come. But the question is, what am I doing to bring redemption into the world through my own effort? So that's a good angle. Thank you for that. Okay, another detail, which is not just a detail, it also turns into one of the big questions of where anti-Semitism comes from, because it's curious to see in the stories in the Torah where anti-Semitism pops up, and maybe the later incarnations of anti-Semitism actually have their roots in the 5 books of Moses, perhaps. So this is something that I mentioned earlier, I mentioned in the past, because there's an interesting word, and the commentaries connect the word here and the story of Balak. So the story of Balak is 40 years later, when the Jewish people are about to enter Israel. They hire, the Balak is one of the surrounding nations that the Jewish people are commanded not to attack. Nevertheless, he hates the Jews, so he hires Bilam to come curse the Jews. And there too, it uses a similar word. So there's a commentary, the Kli Yakar, who I love, who makes a connection between these two episodes and stories and says something very beautiful and I think very profound. But I spoke about this in the past. So if you've been here for a while, you probably heard it, but it's always good so I'm going to try to just mention it briefly. So I don't want to take up all the time. But the word that we're thinking about, is, if you look at chapter 1 and you look at so chapter 1, verse 12. So let me see if I can share the screen here. Right, so in the art scroll, it would be on page 295. So here it's verse 12. So we're talking about how they appoint, we read in verse 11, so they appointed over them tax collectors and afflict them with their burdens, and they built store cities for Pharaoh, namely Pitom and Ramses. But as much as they would afflict them, so did they multiply, and so did they gain strength, and they were disgusted because of the children of Israel. That's what the verse says. They were disgusted? That's the Egyptians. The Egyptians were disgusted because of the children of Israel. Now, the problem is that if you look at the Hebrew word, vayakutsu, which is disgusted, so the way that word is written, the question is, who becomes disgusted, or who? You see, vayakutsu there's 2 meanings. Vayakutsu could be disgusted. Katzti b'chayai, later in the Torah, who says this? Rebecca tells her husband, Katzti b'chayai, I'll be disgusted with my life if Jacob marries a Canaanite woman, so therefore send him back to my homeland. So Katzti could certainly mean disgusted. Vayakutsu could also be from the word kotz, and kotz is a thorn. And when you want to say something that's causing you pain, you say, you evoke that term, that we're being prickled by these thorns. Let me look at the other occurrence where it appears in Balak. Yeah. There it's even more. There it's also interesting. By Yakatz Moab. Moab becomes disgusted, or Moab becomes disgusted because of the children of Israel. Okay. So the Kli Yakar says like this: the word kotz means a thorn. And in a way, what this verse is saying, they became thorns because of the children of Israel. What does that even mean? By Akutsu, they became thorns because of the children of Israel. So the question, so what the Kli Yakar says is a very interesting, very interesting, but I think it's a very deep commentary. He says as follows: so what happens when the Jewish people come to Egypt? What does that do to the Egyptians, to their self-perception? And this is true for Egyptians, but it's also true for when Jewish people come to other countries and how anti-Semites get triggered. So all of a sudden, if you see somebody you value and you see somebody you look up to, then in comparison to that person, you view yourself as insignificant. And if you think about the metaphors in the Song of Songs all over the Bible, you have, let's say, the rose and the thorn. So the thorn is supposed to protect the rose, so the animals don't get to the rose. So that's why the rose is thorny. That's just the biology of it, or the what's the word I'm looking for? Evolution of it. So the thorns protect the plant, the flower. So at some point, the Egyptians come and say, or Egyptians or the Moabites, or it doesn't matter, anyone else, they see something more significant to them. So they see themselves as empty and insignificant in comparisons. So I thought I'm a beautiful flower. I was just a thorn. But when the rose shows up, now I realize there's an interest. The Medrash makes this metaphor where the thorn is in the field, and the thorn and the field is being watered. The person comes to water the field, and the guy thinks he's being thorn, and the thorn thinks it's being watered for himself. But then when the rose grows in, he realizes, oh, it wasn't really about me. It was about they didn't water for me. Nobody cares about the thorn. They care about the rose. In other words, when you have somebody who's more significant than you, it could make you feel insignificant as a thorn. What am I really saying? What is the Kli Yakar saying? Kli Yakar saying is as follows: what do you do when you look at somebody and you see somebody has a quality that you don't have, or quality that you look up to? So one approach would be to learn from the person and to grow, right? I was living on my street, and I thought I'm the kindest guy on the street. And all of a sudden, a new guy shows up to town and he's kinder than me. So one or two things can happen. Either I could say, oh, if I want to be in the game, I have to become more kind because that guy's more kind than me. But if I don't want to be more kind, what does that person now make me do? Now that person makes me feel like a thorn, like an empty, like I'm not of no significance, because that person outperformed me. So now what do I do? If I don't want to improve, what am I going to do? I'm going to hate the person. How do I hate the person? Because that person made me feel like a thorn. Right? So that's what's happening. So you have Jewish people show up to anywhere, and Jewish people are supposed to teach a higher level of morality, a higher level of spirituality. And now the question is, how do the people around them see it? How does Egypt see it? How does Moab see it? How does anyone else see it? So you could see it as a calling and say, oh, now we have a higher standard. And now we want to grow. We want to become like them. We want to learn from them. Or if we don't want to do that, we're just going to hate them. Now, if a person does not value what the Jewish people have, they're not going to hate them because they're not competing. But if that person is going to value morality, then if the Jewish people are bringing a higher standard of morality, then they'll either learn from them or they'll hate them, one or the other. And in a way, the anti-Semite understands the Jew better than anybody else. Maybe sometimes better than the Jew himself, and certainly maybe more better than the people who are apathetic to the Jewish people. Often, the anti-Semite understands what the Jew is saying, and what the Jew is saying is making the anti-Semite feel like a thorn. and that person doesn't want to improve. And if you don't want to improve, you're going to have to hate the other person. So what I'm saying here is not the most pleasant thing to think about, because nobody wants to be the one that makes everybody else upset. But in a way, perhaps there's some profound truth here. So I'm not an expert in anti-Semitism or history, but it's certainly a thought-provoking commentary. And in a way, I could see it in my own life. When you have somebody who you thought you're so good at something and the other person shows up and he's better than you. So then you make a choice. Am I going to improve? Or am I going to hate the person? That's basically my two choices. So that's on the word vayakutsu, and they became thorns, so to speak.
It just seems to be two very radical choices.
Yes.
Without a middle ground. And you would think that there should be a middle ground.
There should be a middle ground. The middle ground should be that somebody is a higher level than you. So either celebrate them, appreciate it, don't take that as a threat, right? Why are you so insecure that somebody else shows up in town, your competition shows up in town, and all of a sudden you are all afraid, and why are you so uncomfortable? So it means you're not secure in who you are, right?
You could also be apathetic.
So apathetic. So I believe. So in a way perhaps the people who are apathetic are the people who are not in tune to what the Jewish people are saying. So they don't feel a competition. I'm not talking about. Forget about the people who are apathetic. The people who hate us sometimes really do understand us. Like Hitler didn't like the Jews because Jews were believed in morality and kindness, and he thought that was weak and soft. Right? In a way, he understood what the Jewish people stood for. In a way.
Well, Hitler also understood that we had a disproportionate amount of success.
Yeah, but he didn't just talk about the success. He didn't just talk about the physical
80
success.
million people,
yeah,
only 500,000 Jews.
Right. He didn't just talk about the physical success and the money and stealing all Germany's wealth, but he also talked about the ideology, what Judaism represents, and that also got him very upset.
Yeah.
So he understood what Judaism is saying. And for other people apathetic, maybe they don't really understand. They don't really understand what Judaism is saying. But if you value morality, and you have the Jewish people are coming and living a higher standard of morality and preaching a higher standard of morality, so either you're comfortable with what you are, that's fine, that's a fine approach, or you want to grow and learn and become better, also a fine approach. But what happens if you have these two components? You value what they say, but you don't want to improve. You don't want to invest. What happens is that makes you feel insignificant. I'm not saying that's the healthy approach, but that's the approach. I'm not saying that's the healthy approach, but I think that at least in some cases, that's what creates the anti-Semitism, right? You have it. It doesn't have to be Judaism. You have your competition moves on to the block, right? So you have a few approaches. One is be happy for the guy. I have my parnasa, I have my livelihood. That guy moved in. He'll have his livelihood. Leave him alone, right? Another thing is not value what he sells. No problem. Another value is, so I'm going to have to become better, right? Another value is, I don't want to become better. I'm not comfortable with what I am because now I see what I can become. So I don't want to invest the effort. So instead, I start hating. That's not a healthy thing. I don't think a psychologist would say that's a healthy thing, but it's a human thing. I'm not justifying this. I'm just explaining what it did to them. I'm suggesting, not explaining. I'm suggesting what perhaps it did to them. And if that's the case, that's why the Torah uses the word vayakutsu. Vayakutsu means literally they became a thorn. Right? And meaning they saw themselves as a thorn. And a lot of times it comes with people, so it can come from two spaces. It can come from a place of somebody who is just simply does not value themselves. So they have no content in their own life. So when they see somebody else who does have content and does have meaning, makes them feel insignificant. So that could be one level. It could also come from a person who they do understand what the Jewish people are saying, and they know that really they should grow, but they don't want to. So that's. But again, these are all different variations of the point that when somebody else shows up, I have to look at myself and I compare myself to them. I'm not saying I should, but it's a human thing to do. And then I have to make peace. I have to say, so what do? Either be happy for the other guy or learn from the other guy, or sometimes you're just apathetic, so you're just out of the picture. But in some cases, it's if I value what the person is doing and I really want that for myself, but for whatever reason I don't want to try to grow, then I'm going to end up hating that person. And what was an opportunity for me to learn from them now just becomes hate. Theory. Okay, Vicky, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Rabbi. I have a question for you. Don't you think that as far as the evolution of humanity and morality on a global scale, the second approach is even is better? Because first of all, if you reject the values because you just hate, you just consider, as you said, that you consider it as a weakness, being moral and being valuing. Human life is weakness, right? Like Hitler did.
Yeah, yeah.
But this one, you actually value what Jews stand for.
Yes.
But just hate them because they do it and you don't. And I think it's a kind of a step forward in the right direction.
I think so. I think in a way this is, I'm not going to say about the Pharaoh, maybe not all Pharaoh, but I'm just saying, I think that in a way, once I wrote about this and I said, I think the anti-Semite understands the Jew better than sometimes the Jew understands himself in some ways. So not all anti-Semites, but some of them. They understand what the Jew represents. Sometimes the Jew says, I don't want to represent anything. I just want to live my life. I want to earn a living and I want to have a peaceful life. But the anti-Semite understands that no, that a Jew represents something more. You represent your history, you represent God's people on earth. And that's going to make people uncomfortable. Why is it going to make people uncomfortable? I hate to be the bearer of the bad news, but it's not news to you that Jews make people uncomfortable. I'm not the first one who told this to you, right? We have a 3,000-year history. But so the question is, why are we making so many people uncomfortable? All I want to do is pay my bills and live in peace, right? But I don't necessarily see what it means to be a Jew. But sometimes the person who hates me knows that I represent more than that. And then the question is, what does that do to that person? What it should do and what it does is sometimes two different steps. But I think that you're making a point that you're saying is that in some way, the person who hates you understands you. The person who's apathetic to you sometimes doesn't really understand what you're saying. So again, this is not, I didn't mean to spend too much time on this. I don't want to make anyone unhappy on such a beautiful Sunday morning when the sun is shining and it's not too hot and it's a wonderful day. But you know what I mean? I mean, we have our history, so you may as well try to understand it, I guess. Go ahead, Dr. Tamarin.
Well, Rabbi, you're not making me uncomfortable, quite the opposite. But my question is this: you say that the anti-Semite perhaps understands the Jew more than the Jew.
In some cases, I'm not saying every anti-Semite that's motivated by bigotry or motivated by being told stories about or falsehoods. I'm saying there are some who do understand us, and that's I'm not saying all anti-Semites, but yes, some. I would say some.
Well, let me elaborate. Have some anti-Semites had enough insight into themselves to ever verbalize the dynamic that you?
Oh, I don't know that it's all intellectual. It could be subconscious. It could be emotional. I know myself that when I come close, if I value something, I value a certain skill, and somebody shows up in my life and outperforms me in something that matters to me, that's a challenge for me. This is something I have to contend with, right? So if you are a much better tennis player than me, okay, I'm very happy for you because it's not the arena where I'm playing. I'm not that good at tennis. I didn't have a tennis, basketball is one thing, but tennis, okay, fine. So you play better than tennis than me. It's not going to make me uncomfortable because I don't play in that arena. But if it's something I'm trying to do and you show up in my field and you outperform me, this is a very unsettling situation. And now I have to look deep in my heart and say, am I jealous of that person? Do I hate the person? Am I going to improve because I'm next to that person? Is that person inspiring me to grow? But the fact that I'm uncomfortable, that's very primal. That is I'm being very honest, talking my own experience here, right? That's very unsettling. And I don't have to, it took me time till I figured out why I'm making so.
But Rabbi,
Why is this person making me so uncomfortable? Because I want to be like him. That's my point here. Why did that guy make me so uncomfortable?
So let's take it right back to where we started. Are you saying that the reason the Jews made Pharaoh uncomfortable is this? He wanted to be like the Jews?
I have to say, the Jews made him feel like they have something that he doesn't have. So in other words, they have a life that has value, They have a life. There's something to that. There's something that they have that he doesn't have. And it's something that he values. Now, it doesn't have to mean their financial success. It could be their moral life. It could be their happiness in life, right? Once Pharaoh has plenty of cash, he doesn't need the Jewish people's money. But there could be other things that Pharaoh needs in his life. He needs loyalty. He needs respect. He needs to think of himself as someone who has meaning. Maybe they have more meaning than he has. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I can relate to the fact that somebody comes into my life and all of a sudden makes me very uncomfortable. And it took me a long time to realize the reason why this guy makes me uncomfortable is because I want to be like him.
Okay.
And it took me a long time to admit that to myself. Right? The person who I don't want, I'm not aspiring to be like that. You could be the most successful in your field. You're not making me uncomfortable. But if I want to be like you, then you make me uncomfortable, and then I have to make a serious choice. Then I say, do I want to learn from you? Do I want to improve? Do I want to just be happy with myself, which is fine too? Learn that you don't have to be the best in your field. That's okay too. But all these things take work. My point is only that the guy who's making me uncomfortable is because I want to be like him.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My point. That's a theory. Again, I'm not saying it's the only way of thinking about this, but I think at least for some of the time, this is an angle that could be interesting. Go ahead, Dr. Bob.
Just again to slightly push back. I mean, we learn about the Benini, we learn about the common man. Aren't we in arenas every day where we are outperformed in our relative and respective avenues and don't hate people?
Yes.
I'm learning with you. You know 2,000 times more Torah than I do. I'm a physician. I'm in a hospital where I'm sure I'm outperformed by physicians every day. I make money, but I'm sure there are billions of people who are smarter than I am in that way. But I don't hate any of them.
Because you're healthy and you're balanced and you have what
So
you
maybe
need.
that's another thing, that there's something else in that formulation. Maybe there's an insecurity or an unhealthiness about the people who hate that we have to keep in mind.
Yes, there's no question about it. But what I'm trying to say is what creates the insecurity? How come before I showed up at the town, that person was secure? So there's something that makes the person off balance. And then the question is how they deal with it. And I think that if you are not jealous and are not made uncomfortable by anyone around you, it means you're very healthy. And for the most part, I think this is how human beings should act and do act. But I'm saying that I can appreciate the concept that sometimes when somebody is very good at exactly the thing you want to be at, and it seems like he's doing this effortless, and for you it seems very difficult. In some cases, that could make a person, jealousy is a reality, and jealousy is, I'm not going to just call it jealousy, but I think it makes a person uncomfortable. And then you have to look at yourself and say, either I'm happy with what I have and I'm content. That's one app. It's a very healthy approach. To learn from my competition is also a healthy approach. To hate the competition is the least healthy approach. But all I'm trying to say is that the fact that that person makes me uncomfortable in a way is because I want what they have. And in Egypt, I don't think it was physical wealth. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I think also there could be things that are less tangible and more metaphysical, that values, meaning, and that could and you see that the other person is happy, and then you remind you that you're not so happy. And then the question is, what does that do to you? And again, I'm not justifying the Pharaoh. I'm just saying this is a phenomenon that this could be one of the avenues. This could be one of the sources. That's what I'm saying. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Rabbi.
Go ahead, Michael, please.
Yes, hi. So I think Dennis Prager is talking pretty much about the same thing with the causes of anti-Semitism. And what he was saying is that when the Jews came, it's like, okay, yeah, they came to the pagan world with multiple deities and multiple moralities and said, no, there's one God. It's all monotheistic. One God, one moral judge, one morality. And people really took it seriously, probably subconsciously believe it, and hated the Jews for it. Because before that, it was like, yeah, it's my God, your God, whatever. It's all relative. It's we can compete, but there's no profound hate. But it's like, oh, different message, one God, one morality. And we, by the way, we're the chosen people. And they resonated to it, and to your point, hated the Jews for it. Because on some deep level, it causes people to believe, and then all that you said about competition and jealousy subconsciously.
You're saying something. You're adding something very significant. You're adding 2 points. First of all, you're saying they believe the Jews, which is interesting. I agree with that. I think it's very interesting. Another thing is you're pointing out that what we're saying is actually, it's not just my competition coming and doing something a little better than me. What you're saying is that it's actually a revolution. It's actually saying that everything you're doing is not the correct path. It's false, or it's not the full picture. So if they were to follow the Jewish model, which maybe innately they feel that this may be true, that means they have to really change their entire philosophy, and they have to change their entire theology, and that's never an easy thing to do. So I think you're making 2 points, and I think both are true. I think you're saying that the message resonates with them, and that's what causes the fact that they feel that they're now lacking. And like I said, the result doesn't have to be hate. I don't think Pharaoh's daughter hated the Hebrews, but I think for many people that's the easier route, other than realizing that maybe the other person has some truth that you don't have, and especially if that truth resonates with you. So I think in some ways, what you're saying, you're adding a lot, but I think I think that the psychological point that I'm making is related to the fact that they sense that it's true. They sense that it's true. Because they sense that it's true, that's why it's so unsettling. And then hopefully healthy people can have a healthy response, but more primal response would be hate. Okay, thank you. The bottom line is that we should conclude with something positive, that wherever we go, people should see us, and they do see us, and they see us not just as people who are just trying to make it through life, but they see us as representative of holiness and a representative of Hashem and Hashem's morality in this world. So that's a good thing. That's a plus. Okay, wonderful day, everybody. Hope to see everybody in good health.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both.